In the ancient world, some punishments were so brutal people begged to confess to crimes they never committed, just to die faster. Imagine this: you steal a loaf of bread, and the state doesn't just punish you, they punish your children, your parents, sometimes your entire bloodline. In Persia, the slowest death could last days. In China, a single accusation could erase your whole family. In Rome, the law allowed torture, even if you were innocent. And here's the part no one likes to talk about. Most victims never got a trial, no lawyer, no defense, just pain, immediate, public, unforgettable. These punishments weren't created to stop crime. They were created to control people, to terrify them, to remind them that the state, or the king, owned your body. Tonight, you're about to hear what really happened to the accused. Punishments so extreme, so cruel, that even historians struggle to explain how humans ever allowed them. Welcome to the truth about ancient justice and why you would not have survived a single accusation. In the ancient world, justice didn't protect people, it protected order, and order was more important than fairness. There were no rights, no presumption of innocence, no guarantee that anyone would listen to your side of the story. Justice operated with one goal: to make the rest of society obey. Punishments weren't designed to correct behavior. They were designed to terrify. A single execution wasn't just a sentence. It was a public message carved into memory. In Mesopotamia, the earliest laws promised retaliation so severe that even the innocent feared being accused. In Egypt and Persia, punishment wasn't just a state matter. It was spiritual, cosmic, and personal. Across Rome, Greece, China, and the kingdoms of India, one truth echoed. Your survival depended on staying invisible, because one wrong word, one wrong step, or one wrong witness could end your life faster than the sun could set. This chapter begins with the very first civilizations, the ones who wrote the earliest laws and built the foundations of the punishments we still fear today. Mesopotamia, the birthplace of brutal law. To understand ancient punishment, we begin where written law itself was born. Mesopotamia. 4,000 years ago, the people of Babylon carved the rules of society into stone, not to teach fairness, but to make fear permanent. The most famous of these laws was the Code of Hammurabi, created around 1750 BCE. It wasn't philosophy, it wasn't morality, it was retaliation, exact, brutal, and uncompromising. If you injured someone, the state injured you. If you destroyed someone's property, yours was destroyed. If you struck the wrong person, especially someone of higher status, your punishment escalated instantly. Social class decided everything. A noble harming a commoner paid a fine. A commoner harming a noble might lose a hand or an eye. False accusations were among the deadliest crimes. If you accused someone and couldn't prove it, you received the punishment you tried to give them. People learned quickly. Silence was safer than speaking. Builders could be executed if their construction collapsed. Surgeons could lose their hands if they harmed a patient. Even tavern keepers faced death if they allowed criminals to gather inside. The earliest known civilizations built justice with a single message: your life only mattered as long as you obeyed. One mistake, one accident, one unlucky moment, and the law carved its answer directly into your body. Persia, where punishment became a warning to the world. When most people think of ancient Persia, they imagine golden palaces, mighty kings, and vast armies. But behind the empire's glory was a justice system built on absolute fear. Persia believed that order was sacred, and chaos was a crime. Every punishment was designed to show the empire's strength, not mercy. Treason was the ultimate offense. Anyone who threatened the king, The army, or the empire's stability, faced the most horrifying executions ever recorded: impalement, stoning, public beatings carried out by entire crowds. Execution methods so iconic that neighboring civilizations copied them out of fear, not inspiration. But Persia also used punishments as political tools. If a governor rebelled, the empire made an example out of his entire household. His wealth was seized, his sons executed, his daughters sold or taken into state service. The message was simple: loyalty kept you alive, disobedience erased your bloodline. Even minor crimes carried brutal penalties. A soldier who deserted during battle faced mutilation, often publicly. A thief who stole royal supplies could be beaten until unconscious, revived, and beaten again. Pain wasn't the goal, fear was. And then there were punishments designed for the empire's enemies, methods crafted not just to kill, but to humiliate. Bodies displayed on roads, city gates, or crossroads to remind everyone entering Persia that the empire was watching. In ancient Persia, punishment wasn't random cruelty, it was strategy, a tool of control, a weapon used to shape society. And for those who lived under that system, survival meant obedience. Persia, the empire of extreme penalties. Few civilizations mastered the art of punishment like the ancient Persians. In their world, crime wasn't just a legal issue, it was an insult to the king, the empire, and the divine order itself. And an insult had to be answered with pain. Persian justice was built on obedience. Every law, every decree, every punishment reinforced a single idea: the empire survives only when fear walks ahead of it. Treason was the ultimate sin, not because it threatened the king, but because it threatened stability. And Persia responded with one of the most horrifying deaths in history: scaphism. Victims were trapped between two boats, force-fed milk and honey until infection took over, and left for insects to consume alive. It wasn't simply a death sentence. It was a message the empire wanted carved into anyone who dared think of rebellion. For lesser crimes, Persians still pushed the limits of human endurance. Impalement was used for traitors and corrupt officials. Stoning punished adultery. Mutilation, the loss of ears, nose, or hands, punished thieves and counterfeiters. And yet Persian law wasn't wild violence. It was structured, deliberate, engineered to inspire fear, so powerful that most crimes ended long before they began. Persia reminds us of a grim truth. Justice in the ancient world did not aim to be fair. It aimed to be unforgettable. Ancient Greece, democracy with a dark edge. Ancient Greece is often remembered as the birthplace of democracy, philosophy, and free thought. But beneath the marble temples and heroic myths was a justice system far more brutal than most people imagine. In Athens, trials lasted only a few hours. No lawyers, no judges, just hundreds of citizens voting on your fate with pebbles. And once the decision was made, there was no appeal. Punishment wasn't symbolic. It was physical, humiliating, and often fatal. The Greeks used public stoning, where the entire community hurled rocks until the condemned collapsed. They used whipping, often to the point of unconsciousness. They used atimia, a punishment stripping a person of all rights, turning them into a living ghost. Slaves were tortured routinely, not as punishment, but as evidence. Greek law believed the truth could only be extracted through pain, so slaves were stretched on racks, burned with heated metal, or beaten until they confessed. And executions were equally direct. The most famous was the cup of hemlock, a slow, paralyzing poison used on criminals, traitors, and even philosophers like Socrates. Others died through scaphism like confinement, starvation, or being hurled into pits. And then there was ostracism, a quiet punishment that seemed harmless but destroyed lives. A man could be banished from Athens for 10 years, simply because citizens feared he was becoming too powerful. No trial, no crime, just exile. Ancient Greece gave the world democracy, but its punishments revealed something darker, that even a free society relies on fear to survive. Sparta, discipline carved into flesh. Sparta was not a city, it was a machine built to produce perfect soldiers. From the moment a child was born, the state decided who lived and who didn't. Every Spartan baby was inspected by the Council of Elders. If the child looked weak, sick, or simply too small, they were carried to the edge of Mount Taygetus and abandoned. This wasn't cruelty. This was policy. Sparta believed that discipline had to be stronger than fear. Pain was not an accident of punishment. It was the method, and the society took pride in breaking boys early, so they would grow into unbreakable men. At age 7, a Spartan boy entered the agora. This was not schooling. It was state-sponsored survival training. They were beaten for mistakes, beaten for failing, beaten even for showing pain. One ancient writer describes a ritual known as the diamastagosis, a brutal whipping contest held at the altar of Artemis Orthia. Young boys were flogged until they collapsed, or until they died. And astonishingly, their parents watched proudly, because enduring agony was considered the highest honor. Discipline invaded every part of life. Cowardice meant public humiliation. A man who fled battle was forced to wear a cloak with colorful patches, a mark of shame. No one would speak to them. No one would marry them. For many Spartans, disgrace was a punishment worse than death itself. Theft was also punished harshly, not because stealing was wrong, but because getting caught showed poor skill. A boy who stole food and was discovered could be whipped until he could no longer stand. The famous story tells of a boy hiding a stolen fox under his cloak. Rather than admit guilt, he let the animal tear into his stomach until he died. Silently. In Sparta, every punishment had one purpose: to forge citizens who did not break, even in the face of agony. This chapter shows the truth behind Sparta's reputation. A society where discipline wasn't taught. It was carved into the body. China's age of legalism, order through fear. In ancient China, during the rise of the Qin dynasty, justice was not a debate. It was an instrument of absolute state control. Legalism was the philosophy that shaped this world, a belief that humans were naturally selfish, naturally disobedient, and therefore needed punishment so severe that even thinking about breaking the law became unthinkable. Under legalism, laws were written with cold precision. They applied to everyone: peasants, merchants, generals, even nobles. And punishment was immediate. There were no excuses, no moral arguments, no mercy. If the law was broken, punishment followed. If the law was questioned, punishment followed. And in some cases, if someone in your family broke the law, punishment followed you. One of the most feared penalties was the 5 punishments. These were not symbolic ideas. They were physical, violent, and irreversible. The lightest was tattooing. Characters carved or burned into the skin to mark someone as a criminal for life. Next came nose cutting and ear removal. Mutilations meant to permanently humiliate, ensuring a person could never hide from their crime. Then came amputation, feet or legs removed, turning a person into a warning. Forced labor was another. Entire families sent to harsh work sites, building walls, canals, and roads under brutal conditions, where most died long before their sentence ended. But the final punishment, the highest one, was death, and it wasn't always quick. Some executions were carried out by beheading, the cleanest form of death. Others used a slower method called waist severing, where the body was cut in half at the midsection. And for those the state considered traitors or rebels, the punishment extended beyond the individual. It reached their parents, their children, even distant cousins. This was known as collective punishment, and it ensured that loyalty to the emperor was a matter of survival, not devotion. Under legalism, fear was not a side effect. It was the foundation of order. The state believed that when the people feared the law more than they feared each other, society would finally be stable. It worked, but at an unbearable cost. The Qin dynasty was united by terror, held together by punishment so terrifying that many chose silence, obedience, or submission rather than risk being noticed. This chapter reminds us of a truth that repeats throughout history. When law becomes a weapon, justice becomes indistinguishable from cruelty. Egypt, crimes against the gods. In ancient Egypt, punishment carried a weight unlike anywhere else, because every crime was judged not only by the state, but by the gods themselves. Egyptians believed the universe stood on a thin line called Ma'at, the principle of order, balance, and truth. To break the law was to break Ma'at, and to break Ma'at meant threatening the harmony of the entire kingdom. Because of this, punishment in Egypt wasn't simply practical. It was spiritual, cosmic, and symbolic. Small offences like cheating in trade or disrespecting an official could bring public beatings, 50 to 200 lashes with palm rods, or temporary enslavement in labour camps. The goal was humiliation, not correction. More serious crimes triggered punishments meant to restore Ma'at by force. Tomb robbery, one of the gravest sins, carried brutal consequences. Robbing the dead meant disturbing the afterlife, so offenders were often burned alive, drowned, or hacked to pieces before being dumped into the desert, explicitly denying them a proper burial. To an Egyptian, this was worse than death. It was annihilation of the soul. Blasphemy and sacrilege were met with swift destruction. Those who insulted a god or defaced a sacred statue could face excision of the tongue, mutilation, or the infamous red-hot iron branding across the face, a mark declaring them permanently cursed. Treason brought the harshest fate of all. Anyone who questioned the pharaoh's divine authority, officials, soldiers, even family, could be sentenced to forced suicide, burning, or execution by the blade, often carried out without trial. The pharaoh's will was absolute. His judgment needed no witness. Criminals used as an example were sent to hard labour in the desert quarries, a sentence so deadly that prisoners rarely survived more than a few months. Heat, dehydration, rock slides, and exhaustion killed slowly. A living punishment rather than an execution. Egypt's justice system wasn't chaotic. It was organised, consistent, and deeply rooted in religion. But that made it even more terrifying. Because to the Egyptians, punishment wasn't meant to balance society. It was meant to restore the universe itself. And when the universe demanded order, the human body paid the price. Ancient India, justice, written in fire and caste. In ancient India, justice was not written for all people equally. It was carved into society through the caste system. A hierarchy so strict that the same crime could mean a fine for one man and mutilation for another. The Manusmriti, one of the earliest legal texts, created a world where purity, honor, and social order mattered more than truth. The law did not treat people as individuals. It treated them as members of a fixed rank. A Brahmin might be fined for a crime that would cost a Shudra his hand or his life. Punishments reflected this brutal inequality. There were ordeals, trials by fire, where the accused was forced to hold red-hot iron or walk across burning coals. If the wounds healed cleanly, the gods were believed to have proven innocence. If the burns festered, the verdict was sealed. Guilty. For theft, branding was common. A hot iron pressed against the forehead or hands, marking a person forever. Repeat offenders faced amputation, sometimes performed in public as a display of what happened to those who disrupted order. Adultery could result in disfigurement or forced shaving of the head, a punishment meant to publicly destroy honor. False testimony carried penalties ranging from heavy fines to the removal of the tongue, depending on caste and intent. And worst of all were the penalties for sacrilege, damaging sacred objects, defiling temples, or insulting the priestly class. These could end in drowning, burning, or being tied to the foot of an elephant, a method used to execute criminals with terrifying efficiency. Ancient India's justice system was built on two beliefs: that the gods watched everything, and that society's order could not be questioned. Breaking the law didn't just make you guilty, it made you impure. And impurity was a stain the law was determined to burn away, sometimes literally. The Aztec Empire, punishment under the eyes of the gods. Among all ancient civilizations, few delivered justice with the intensity of the Aztec Empire. Their laws, unlike those of Rome or China, were not written to maintain order alone. They were written to satisfy the gods. In the Aztec worldview, every crime was a disruption of cosmic balance. Stealing, lying, adultery, drunkenness, land disputes, all of it threatened harmony. And restoring that harmony required punishment that was unmistakable, unforgettable, and deeply spiritual. One of the most feared punishments was death by the obsidian blade. Executions were public, precise, and ritualized. A criminal might be laid across a stone slab, while priests cut through the chest with sharp volcanic glass, the same method used in religious sacrifice. For repeat thieves, punishment escalated quickly. A first offense might bring forced labor. A second, the loss of property. A third, death by strangulation with a rope twisted behind the neck. Fast, quiet, and final. Adultery carried one of the most unforgiving penalties in the ancient world. Both partners, if caught, were stoned to death. There were no exceptions, no second chances, no appeals. Honor mattered more than the individuals involved. Drunkenness was treated with strict cultural precision. Adults were punished severely, often executed, but children caught drunk were forced to inhale the burning smoke of chili peppers, a punishment intended to scar memory, not flesh. Those who damaged crops or interfered with food production faced a penalty reflecting the empire's constant hunger. Death by being beaten with heavy wooden clubs. The Aztecs saw threatening the food supply as threatening the entire cosmos. Even selling goods at the wrong price could lead to execution. Market inspectors walked the great plazas daily, watching for overcharging, a crime treated as fraud against the community and the gods. And perhaps most shocking of all, some criminals were sentenced to ritual sacrifice, not as victims, but as offerings. Their blood, the Aztecs believed, kept the sun moving across the sky. In the eyes of the empire, death through sacrifice transformed punishment into cosmic duty. Aztec justice wasn't built on fear alone. It was built on the belief that the gods demanded balance. And for the Aztecs, balance was always paid for in blood. The Maya, punishment under the watchful gods. Far from the empires of Rome, Persia, and China, the ancient Maya built a world ruled by kings, astronomer priests, and gods who demanded balance. Justice wasn't simply law, it was cosmic maintenance. Every crime threatened harmony, and punishment restored it. In the Maya world, justice was spiritual, brutal, symbolic, and deeply public. Common crimes included adultery, theft, arson, sacrilege, and treason. And the Maya did not treat these lightly. Theft, for example, nearly always required compensation, not money but service. The guilty could be forced into lifelong labor for the victim's family. If they refused or resisted, punishments escalated quickly. Adultery was one of the harshest offenses. A married woman caught with another man could be legally executed, often by stoning or strangulation. In some regions, the lovers were tied together and thrown off a cliff, a punishment meant to shame both families and appease the gods who oversaw marriage. For arson, especially burning a home or storehouse, the Maya sometimes used a punishment Western historians rarely mention: the destruction of the arsonist's own property. Their house could be burned to the ground as retribution, with the community watching as the flames erased their status. Crimes against temples or sacred objects were treated as direct attacks on the gods. Sacred theft could lead to disfigurement, cutting off fingers used to steal, or ritual execution. In Maya belief, you did not merely break a rule, you disrupted the balance of the universe. For severe crimes like murder, the rules were precise. If it was intentional, the victim's family were permitted to execute the murderer themselves. But if the death was accidental, the murderer could repay the family through service, tribute, or land. Justice was personal, emotional, and rooted in honor. And then came treason, betraying a king or city. This was unforgivable. Elite conspirators were sometimes publicly sacrificed, their deaths turned into a ceremonial spectacle meant to reinforce divine order. The Maya saw rulership as sacred. Attacking a king was attacking the gods themselves. Punishment had to match the cosmic scale of the crime. Maya justice was not random brutality. It was structured, ritualistic, and bound to a universe where every action echoed into the spiritual realm. To break the law was to break the world, and the consequences were unforgettable. The silent edge of justice, ancient Japan. In ancient Japan, justice moved with the silence of a blade. There were no long trials, no crowded courts, no shouting crowds. Punishment arrived quietly, and when it did, it struck with absolute precision. Japan's early legal system, shaped by clan power and later by imperial law, relied heavily on obedience. You obeyed your lord. You obeyed your family. You obeyed the ancestral order. Failure to do so wasn't seen as a mistake. It was a stain on the entire lineage. The most severe punishment was crucifixion, called haritsuke, a method used for murderers, arsonists, and rebels. Unlike Roman crucifixion, which was meant for display, Japanese crucifixion often began with the victim already dead or near death, and then the body was left exposed as a warning to anyone who dared challenge the order. But the punishment most associated with ancient Japan is decapitation, swift, clean, and final. From samurai executions to peasant crimes, the blade decided fate. The idea was simple: judgment should be as sharp as the steel delivering it. There were other punishments too: burning, drowning, and in some cases being buried alive. Thieves could lose a hand. Adulterers could be tied together and left to starve. And traitors. They faced a punishment known as otoshi-zimi, where the condemned was dropped into a pit to die slowly in darkness. For samurai, however, there existed a grim privilege: seppuku. A ritual suicide that allowed a condemned warrior to preserve his honor by taking his own life before the executioner could. It was painful, deliberate, and deeply symbolic. A reminder that in ancient Japan, honor could be more important than survival itself. What made Japanese punishment so unique wasn't the cruelty alone, but the discipline behind it. Pain wasn't just inflicted, it was choreographed. Order was not just enforced, it was embodied. And justice wasn't a public spectacle. It was a silent warning written in steel and ritual. What ancient punishments reveal about us? When we look back at the ancient world, it's easy to feel distant from it, as if those punishments belong to a different species, a different kind of human. But the truth is far more uncomfortable. Every punishment you've heard tonight was created by people who lived, loved, feared, and dreamed just like we do today. And yet they allowed cruelty to become law, pain to become order, and fear to become a tool of governance. Mesopotamia carved justice into stone. Egypt fused law with godly authority. Persia used terror as a political weapon. Greece embraced emotion over fairness. China perfected punishment as a science of obedience. India tied justice to social hierarchy. The Maya enforced order through ritual and cosmic belief. Japan elevated punishment through honor, duty, and shame. Different cultures, different eras, the same logic. Punishment was not about fairness, it was about control. And as we examined each civilization, a pattern emerged. Societies didn't punish crime, they punished threat. Threat to rulers, threat to religion, threat to order. The most frightening realization is not what they did, but why it worked. Fear kept people silent. Fear kept people obedient. Fear held entire civilizations together. Our modern world believes itself more advanced, more humane, but echoes of these ancient systems still survive in the laws we inherit, in the prisons we build, in the instinct to protect order at any cost. Tonight wasn't just a journey through brutal punishments. It was a reminder of how thin the line is between justice and terror, and how quickly societies can cross it. If history teaches us anything, it is this: the moment we stop demanding fairness, the moment we grow comfortable with fear, is the moment ancient justice returns. Because the past is never really gone. It waits in the shadows of our systems, in the silence of our fears, in the fragile balance between power and the people. And the truth is simple. If we were born in any of these ancient empires, we wouldn't just fear punishment, we would expect it.